him, he so much time we had together every single Friday, right, Johnny teacher? Every single Friday over the 1 years. So this is a really big proof how much he loved this wife and loved you guys, you know, because he lived the life, he lived, uh, he showed his mind, his heart by living, you know. So 조니 선생님이 얼마나 너희들 사랑하는지는 선생님이 너 매주 금요일마다 나와서 섬기는 게 그 증거가 됩니다. 그래서 today I will call, I will introduce the Johnny teacher. Let us applause to him to welcome him. All right, Johnny teacher, ready? All right. Ready? Okay, Johnny teacher. Yeah.
Everyone hear me? All right. So as Pastor Sean has pointed out, yeah, I've been not only have I been serving at Tongsan as a teacher for quite over 10 years, I've been working in not as just as a teacher, but in the world of education for the past 8 years now. Yeah. So just before we begin, let us just pray all together. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for just gathering us all here tonight, Lord. Lord God, I just pray that just the main takeaway from this seminar is, one, not just to learn more about what it's like to be a teacher, but also a counselor, but also what it's like to be a Christian in the world of education. And I just pray in His own name, Jesus Christ. Amen. So we move to the next slide. Ben, teacher. All right, sorry. Now, I'm going to be doing that a lot, so please bear with me. So I want to start out with the Bible verse that I kind of had to carry. I would best say represents my entire career. It's Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. In the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about why I chose that as pretty much the Bible verse of my career. So I started out college. I went to Manhattan College over in Riverdale. Got a bachelor's in adolescent education, concentration social studies. So what that means is, from grades 7 to 12, I can teach social studies in that grade. However, if I want to go below that, I would have to go back to school for that to get another degree for that. And this is where the Bible verse comes in. At that time, instead of trusting in the Lord, I trusted in myself, meaning this is what I believed was the right path for me. And I'll touch on it a little bit about how to become a teacher or get a job in a school. I struggled, I want to say, 2 years, 3 years to landing a job in a school. And that's where I had to really think about, is this really a path for me? Is this really the career that God wants me? And at that time, that's where I spoke to the previous youth pastor, Pastor Daniel, and he told me, well, first off, he mentioned that maybe I should go to missions that year, because I think that's what God was calling me. And I kind of felt that God was calling me, but I really wanted to focus more on my career and my future everything. I want to say, like, literally at the last second, I was just like, you know what, God, if you want me to go to missions, I'll go. My life is in your hands. And right before I left, that's when I got a new job at graduate school for, again, Manhattan College and school counseling for a master's. And everything seemed to go well. And if I'm sweating, I am very, yeah, it's a little hot in here for me, so please bear with me. And at some point after getting my master's, there wasn't a lot going on for me. And here's the thing about school counselors. The job market is actually very small. As great as a pay is, which I'll touch upon, not a lot of people can find jobs. It's one of those jobs is where once you get that job, you're pretty much there for life. So you're not going to find many openings. And this is where I go back to, now I'm currently back in graduate school part 2, adolescent students with disabilities. This is where I'm only going to be specialized in teaching special education for students from grades 7 to 12. And that could range from any subject, and we'll get more into that. Next slide. This is the one I'm going to be talking about, 3 chapters. First, I'm going to focus on special education, then school counseling, and then finally, how to get into the job field. And now, chapter 1, special education teacher. And now, next slide. So this is like the main responsibility, and even though the slides I have up there is pretty sounds simple, it's really not. First part, ensure students receive adequate education. No duh. Oh, that's pretty much the teacher's job. Make sure everyone gets their adequate education. But when it comes to a special education teacher, they have to deal with different, let's say, disabilities and conditions. And you will see, I'll show you a list shortly what it looks like. Assisting parents. When it comes to teaching with students, teachers can only do so much in school, okay? What happens in here, what happens in classroom is all we can control. When it's at home, the parents have to, this is where I really stress to the parents where you need to step in. And that could be for whatever reason. And when it comes to special education students, they're dealing with conditions that, I'm gonna be honest, parents are not well equipped to handle. Some of them are, others not so much. And they're gonna be coming to you to ask you questions. Like, for example, I have a student who can't sit still while doing homework. How can I get him to sit still? And that's where you come in and say, this is how your child, does in my class. Try this, or try that, okay? And next part, make sure the students' IEPs are implemented and followed. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about IEP a little bit, but first and foremost, the special education students will have either an IEP or a 504 plan. There is a difference between those two. It may not be as much, but there is a difference. And I want to stress this to not just everyone here, not just the potential teachers, but the parents as well. I'm gonna be honest, in today's schools, there's no true general education class. Every class, even if it's like an honors class, general education, whatever, there's at least gonna be one student that has an IEP. And that can range from anything from, okay, this student is classified as visual impaired. What do you do there? Very simple. I mean, not simple, but you could be like, okay, this student could have specialized glasses, has to sit up front, give him a very large iPad or a much larger screen. Others could just be like, so again, can't sit still, ADHD, all that. There's going to be at least one student that's going to be in your class. You have to get used to it. And that's where collaborating with teachers and assisting them. You will see that the best way I can explain is there are a few classes where you'll have 2 teachers in the room. That's usually called a co-taught class. A co-taught is really just 2 teachers, a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher. They work as a partner, and they can really run the class any way they like. It can run from the general ed teacher just teaching the whole time while the special ed teacher stands in the back, make sure the students who have IEPs are being taught, are focusing, following along, and making sure the IEPs are being met. They could switch off here and there. work in groups. There's many different ways. And by and large, as special education teachers, you'll be known as a case manager, meaning you'll have your own set of students with IEPs, and you have to make sure that everything the plan is being followed. And I'll show you a copy of what an IEP is going to look like. It's a lot, and you have to somehow tell the teacher, hey, this is what's in their IEP. It must be met. And from my experience, there are a lot of teachers who are just very resistant. For example, I have one student who suffers from dysgraphia, meaning for whatever reason, they have all the answers in their head, but when it comes to time to typing it down or writing it down, they just can't do it. There's a mental block in their head that just won't allow them to do it. And there's been, when it comes, like for example, math class, in order to get full credit, you have to show your work. Somehow, he just does all the work in his head and just gets the answer. However, because he doesn't show his work, he doesn't get full credit. And now, what could be A, what should have been an A, is now a C because he didn't show his work. Do you guys believe that's fair for the student to receive a C because he didn't do it? No. That's where the special education teacher comes in and steps in and says, remember, this student just can't write it down. He gave you the answer. He's doing all in his head. He's not cheating. There's no way for him to cheat. So he is doing his work. He has earned his grade, so maybe we could change or do something. And that's you'll see a lot of that. Now, next slide, this is where I'm going to talk more about the IEP and the 504 plan. Now, the IEP stands for Individualized Education Program, and the 504 plan. And Pastor Sean, can you come up here for a second? Okay, so, yes, give me a second. Let me just make sure there's everything. Yeah, it's just a giant packet. Pass it. You just have to pass it. Because I just don't. Originally, I wanted to show you an example of what an IEP plan looks like. Those at home who can't see it, if you want to see it on Sunday, let me know. I'll bring it. It's the one I have is a 22-page packet plan that details, one, who the student is, what is his disability, or her disability, and how are we going to address them. And on the page, you'll see what they're capable of. For example, remember what I said, like the example I had as a student, for some reason, just cannot write anything down. But he's doing all the work in his head. You'll see on this packet, there's a score saying, okay, he's scoring from range 120 to 147. Granted, the example I given out, it doesn't really say that, but on that plan, you'll see that this is what the student was capable of. And you will need that, and you need to share with everyone needed. Now, there's a 504 plan. Really, it's essentially the same thing. It's a 50 as an IEP. The only main difference is that in the 504 plan, there has to be physically something preventing that student from receiving that education. It could range from something as simple as, okay, this student recently broke his ankle. How can he go to class if his class is on the dirt floor and he's in a wheelchair? Simple. Provide him a wheelchair. That's a 504 plan. Or, hey, the student here has asthma, but now you have that kind of, you have to keep that in mind when you lesson plan, that maybe you can't do anything that's just going to cause him for his asthma to attack, and when it does happen, what do you do there? So you need those plans in place. And just to keep everyone aware, the plans that are being given, that are implemented, they're not here to fix the problem. Look, I'm gonna be honest. The disabilities and conditions you're gonna have, for the most part, you're gonna be with them for life. That's just the reality of it. The plan that the teachers implement, the special education teachers plan and implement, is to build up good habits and help them learn, help them do well in school, and in turn, hopefully help get ready for the world outside after school. And this doesn't just mean can this student learn in class? You're gonna see there are gonna be students who just like, you know what, I'm gonna be honest. There are students out there who are just like, there's just no way they're gonna go to college. That's just the reality of it. So you have to, as a special education teacher at that point, is to make sure that they are ready for life after school. Because at a certain age, they're not gonna be on their own. How are they gonna survive on their own? Yes, they're parents, but not gonna be there forever. And there are so you have to prepare for that reality. And lastly, and this is also a very crucial thing, the parents must approve the plan, meaning they have to agree what's being told. Because by the end of the day, the parents have the legal right to say, great, I see the plan, I like it, but I don't want this. I have had parents who said, no, I don't want, this plan you have laid out for me, we don't want it. That can range from a lot of reasons. The most common reason I've faced is that they don't want to accept the reality of their child having a disability. Why? I don't know. It could be pride. It could be the fact that they don't want others to know. But a lot of them just don't want to accept that reality. And unfortunately, the student is the one who suffers from this. Okay? And now, if we go in the next slide, we're going to see who gets an IEP or a 504. And it's a pretty extensive list. While it may seem like it's specific, a lot of it each topic is its own topic. If I had more time to go through every single one, I would do it in terms of what falls under what. Like we have autism, blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, learning disability, other health impairment. And next page, multiple disabilities, orthopedic, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, visual impairment, hearing impairment, and ADHD. Now, granted, according to the New York State DOE, Department of Education, the ADHD falls technically under learning disability. However, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, in the world of education, it's always changing. In terms of what are the criterias, the learning standards you need to implement, that's always going to change. And in this case here, in terms of ADHD, it's slowly changing to the point where ADHD is going to have its own category, just because of how prevalent it is. And keep in mind like I said, each portion has its own subcategory. For example, like other health impairment, that is literally every single disease imaginable rolled up into one. Okay? And you have, as a special education teacher, you have to be prepared to address every single of those needs. And the reality is, depending on, and we go to the next slide, you're going to see we see a bunch of classrooms in schools. I touched upon what co-taught class was, where it's two teachers, they work together and make sure that it goes at a little slower pace than general education classrooms, just so that they might need a little bit more time to process the information, make sure the students are understanding what's going on, and there's a lot of modifications that goes on. And then right after that, there's core classes. That's a much smaller classroom. You'll see there's like, you'll see there are like maybe like at most 5 students per class, and that goes even much slower pace. Like, for example, in one unit in general ed education classrooms, you probably cover 10 topics. Core classes, maybe 7 topics, 6, depending on the level. Core classes, you'll be lucky to get through 5. And then there's self-contained. That is, I possibly where there are some academics being done. Like core classes, it's a much smaller classroom. However, when it comes to academics, that's not the goal for that classroom. Okay. For example, let's say we have a 7th grade class. Let's just say a 7th grade math class. They're learning about Pythagorean theorem. In a self-contained classroom, a student who is in that classroom is at the same age. They're learning how to count 1, 2, 3, or basic subtraction. That's the pace that they're going at. And and not only that, it's some of them, if they show tremendous growth, they can be pushed up to the next level. That is always a possibility. However, if that's not a possibility and they start to regress, the focus, you can just hold on to that. Thank you, Eric. Okay. If they start to regress, at that point, the focus should be less on academics and more on, okay, will they be able to find a job on their own? Can they perform that job on their own? Are they going to be able to do something simple as clean by themselves? That's something that you, as special education teachers in a self-contained classroom, have to worry about. And then when I say regress even further, I don't mean by their academic level, I mean their behavioral. And that's where therapeutic schools come in. This is where could be the same level as self-contained, maybe less. But these schools are specifically created so that they do not, one, harm themselves or harm others. For example, there's one student I once worked with. He had I want to say full on autism, and he not suffered, but if he saw like an open door, if no one was watching him, just gets up and run out that door screaming his top of his lungs. And he hated being in the classroom so much that he will do not only will he just run out, he'll do whatever he can to get teachers away from him. Like he would scream in your face. He will scratch you, hit you, spit at you, and do everything possible to get the teacher away from them. It really got to the point where, is the school that I'm at properly prepared to have the student in our school and not cause harm to himself and to others? And that's where the therapeutic schools have come in. And keep in mind, like I said, parents must approve everything. I mean, they must approve everything. If the parents really strongly say, no, we're not taking our kid out of this school, we want him to stay here, no matter what happens, for better or for worse, he is staying in that school. Okay? And the hospitals, that is really at that point where either they're just so physically ill that they just can't attend school, or they really are just that big of a threat to themselves or to others. And I don't mean threat as in they're violent, but they could cause harm. Okay? And now next slide, there's classroom management. This is not just for special education, but this is just for general education. From what I've learned, there's 3 types of, teachers generally falls under 3 different types. They're authoritarian, friend, authoritative. Authoritarian and friend are pretty much self-explanatory. You have authoritarian, it's his way or his or her way, or you're done for the year. While a friend is more like, okay, I'm here to, let's just chill, hang out, and just let's get through the day. Authoritative is more like in the middle of the combination of the two. Yes, the teacher is not they're not that strict but they're just strict enough where one, they get to do the class, and also the student feels comfortable enough where they don't like fear for their, not fear for their lives, but they don't want to meet the classroom anymore. Okay. And I have to say the classroom management is probably one of the most difficult aspects, probably the most difficult aspect of teaching. Okay. Just keep in mind, there's only one teacher versus 20 to 30 kids in a classroom. And not all the kids are the same. Just because you know how to behave in class doesn't mean that kid next to you doesn't know how to behave, or they don't want to be there, they'll just are acting up. It takes one student to start acting up, and that soon causes the rest of the class to start acting up. And as a teacher, you're stuck with them for the rest of the school year. Either you get the class in order, or you quit. Those are your only options. Now, finally, next slide. So of the three I just said, this is more for you guys, here or at home. Of the three, which is the best approach, or the best approach you would like to have? I'll give you time to think, and just, if you want to share, raise your hand. Okay. Yes, Andrew? Why authoritative? Mm-hmm. Okay. So those who didn't hear, he said authoritarian is, he said oppressive, right? Or you don't want the classroom to have that oppressive feel. While with friend, you don't want to be too lenient and lose control of the classroom. Fair point. Anybody else? Yes, Jen? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good, fair point. And now I'm gonna pull a teacher move. Noah. That teacher move is called cold call, meaning if no one's raising their hand, you pick somebody. Pretty self-explanatory. So what do you think? You don't know? All right, fair enough. So, from my experience, as great as authoritative sounds, I am not going to say it's the best. Ideally, sounds the best. But this is where you as a teacher have to know your students. Meaning, what is the best approach for your class? Yes, for most of the time, authoritative works. However, you're going to have that one class or one school, no matter how kind, no matter how firm you are, they're just going to try to push your buttons. And the only way they'll listen is authoritarian. And that's not because that's what they prefer. That's just that's what they're used to. They're used to having an adult being very firm with them and say, hey, get up. Noah, get up. Stand up. Sit back down. That's what they're used to. Okay? Yeah, Eric, it is scary, right? Guess what? This is also another hint where when you first saw it as teachers, you're gonna, unless you know your connections, you're gonna start off with working in the roughest schools in New York. Okay? And if you do not build up that firmness, if you do not build up that thick skin, you're not gonna last. Okay? Case in point, I worked in the middle school in Brooklyn. Do you know what happened to me? A sixth grader came out to me. I told him, hey, get to class. He's like, who the hell do you think you are, huh? You better watch out who you're talking to. I will smack the out of you. That's the type of students I had to work with. Okay? And that's where my authoritarian side had to come up. And I don't really recommend you guys saying this because this might get you in a lot of trouble. I told them, all right, do it right now. See what happens. I guarantee you ain't walking away from here. That could get me a lot of trouble because it's like, yeah. So those watching at home, please don't do it. Those who are here, please don't do that as well. But that authoritarian style made the kid, one, show them that who's in charge, and two, not to mess with me. Because that's the only way they got, and I'm gonna be honest, that was the only way for them to listen. So that's why, that goes back to what I said. There is no one true, perfect way. You know your students, know what they're about, know what their personality is like, and you go from there. Okay? Now the next part, probably the most fun part, lesson planning. This time I actually did make copies for everyone, so Pastor Sean K. pass out to everyone. I'm gonna leave one for me. So the lesson planning is exactly what it sounds like, a plan for a lesson. So what I have here is just a sample lesson plan I made for just a random middle schools. Just pass it down. And this is what your entire class, your entire lesson is be based on. And I know the printout's a little mess. I may have messed up the copies because it's like upside down. Please bear with me. So, in case as you should know, if you didn't know, well, a teacher doesn't just like make up a lesson on the spot. You're just asking for failure at that point. They spent whatever off time they have on making this lesson plan. And it has to be for a very effective lesson plan. You have to know your objectives and know what activity you're going to do and make sure you can deliver that. Technically, those at home, you can see the little sheet on the slide. That's an example of one lesson plan. It's blank, but you can literally just write down objectives. Teach 1 + 1 = 2. And materials, worksheet. And closure, exit ticket. That's not a good lesson plan, but it's still a lesson plan. And no matter every lesson plan you have to submit it to the higher ups, meaning you're the head teacher or whoever, to make sure that all the needs are met. And in this case here, and this is where special education teachers need to look at, because as you know, those who are here, you see in the packet there's IEP. In this case here, I think one student, if I remember correctly, in that lesson plan, the scenario I made up, has a tough time reading or comprehending what he's reading. Okay, so what do you do with there? This is called differentiation, meaning, okay, not every student is the same. Each student learns differently. For example, there are students who learn best by just sitting there, letting the teacher talk, and you just write down notes. Other students prefer moving around, just getting their bodies involved, getting up, running around, just being active. Others who just work amazing in group work. Why? Maybe because they just enjoy talking to others and learning from others. You have to keep that all in mind when you're making a lesson plan, because not all students are the same. They all learn differently. And keep in mind, this is just one lesson plan for one class. I'm in a class of, I'm doing grade 7 to 12, meaning I'm going to have 5 or 6 different classes a day. Therefore, each lesson plan I'm going to make is going to be different, every single one. They could be the same. However, again, this, like I said, with teaching classroom management, you have to know your students. If, let's say for this, if you're going to read as a class, you can read it all together. Or, like I said, if the students in your class just happen to learn better in group settings, have them work in a group setting. And you can give them some modifications, meaning, for example, that one particular student has tough time comprehending the information that's given to him. Maybe give him or her a separate packet with like highlighted marks saying this is what's, letting them know this is what's important, or giving them a modified packet that's spaced out, maybe easier to read, maybe not so many vocabulary words, just the important ones, all that. So that's what goes into, and then this is probably like the most time consuming, because like I said, there's 5 or 6 different classes, maybe 100 students you're working with, and every day is something new with them. You have to be prepared for everything. Here's a little case study I present you all. There are 28 students in this classroom. Yes, you have to get used to that. You're gonna get used to the fact that that there's this many students. And here's the thing. The New York State the DOE states that for the most effective classes, the ratio to students to teachers should be 15:1. Unfortunately, that's never going to be the case. Are they going to change it? They haven't changed it then, they're not going to change it now. So you better get used to it. Now, the IEP that you receive states at least 5 need to sit up front, and 1 needs to sit close to the door, and another reads in a much lower grade level, and another refuses to write. It's May, and it's end of the day. Now, before I move on, why does that matter? Why do you think it matters? Yes, David? Everyone's tired by now. Yeah, it's the end of the day. Like, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, you guys, everyone here, you guys are students, right? By the end of the day, are you really as energetic as you were 2 hours before? No. And here's the thing, neither are the teachers. So you gotta keep that in mind. And why is the fact that I state May very important? Yes, Noah? Weather. No, weather does play a huge role, actually. Yes. Yes, Eric? The school year is about to end. That's also, remember, if the end of the day you're that exhausted and you don't want to do anything, imagine the end of the year. The end is almost here. All you can think about is summer vacation. At that point, not everyone's in the working mood. So you have to keep that in mind as well. The lessons on the fall of Berlin. Why? I just made that up, and the smart board stops working. You will have to get used to the fact that technology may not always come through. So, next slide. Now, knowing the case study and all the information, what do you want to do in this situation? What do you do here? David Koo, you're the teacher of this classroom. What should you do? How will you tackle this class? You gotta have to speak up a little bit. Surprisingly, I'm pretty old. My hearing is not that good as it used to be, so you have to speak up. Move the tables? How do you want to move the tables? Okay. So put 7 tables in the front. Okay. Okay. Now let me ask you this. Are you going to do that just for that one class or all the classes? Because I don't know about you. I am not I am not ready to move that table every single day for just for that one class. No. Okay. Again, there's nothing wrong. David, your suggestion was good, very good actually. But these also, you have to think about all the possibilities. Okay. And who else has another idea? You know what? I'm gonna pick on a teacher. Paul, teacher, you're the teacher of this class. What do you recommend? Give everyone a free period. Oh my gosh, a free period. The kids will love you. Now the problem with I'm not gonna dissect every if this was a 2-day seminar, I would dissect every single thing wrong with that. So, yes, Noah. Sit on the floor. Okay, interesting. Why do you say that? Interesting, interesting. All right. Now, how will that promote learning? No, no, I'm not gonna lie. That's actually a decent idea. Like, honestly, it's a change of pace. It's different. Sometimes different brings excitement. That's a good idea. I actually like that. Yes, David. Have more engaging material. Okay. More active, more engaging. Okay. What's your definition of engaging and active? Group activity? Like what? Read the stuff. What? In the groups. Fair point. Now, how are you going to make those groups? How? Those people, whoa, okay. Now I'm messing with you. Okay. Okay. Okay, I see what you're trying to say. So you just want, so instead of making one into groups where one person does all the group, you want to try and make it as fair as possible, correct? Now, remember, I'm restating the IAP. You're gonna have that one student who doesn't want to write. How are you gonna address that? That person could work with what, like, with you, the teacher alone. So in other words, you're gonna focus on that one student and ignore the 27. Oh, okay. So you go give him more, emphasize him, that student really more, but still show attention to others. All right, fair. And I'm gonna just to cut Andrew. Which idea? Sorry. Okay, group activity. All right. Okay. Oh. Oh, interesting. Okay, so you're gonna have that one student give their answers orally. Oh, so you're making everyone do it orally, so that student who doesn't want to write has to speak. Morris, I like that actually. Good. Hey, may be a teacher right here. All right. So again, when I dissected everyone's points, that wasn't me trying to like pick on you guys. Again, this goes back to what I said. You have to be prepared for everything. And the next slide I have. These are not the correct, not just they don't have to be considered as correct answers, but these are just a list of possibilities. For example, like make the lesson less intensive, meaning don't make it as intense as your previous classes. Maybe lighten it a little bit, maybe less workload. Just make sure that everyone's attentive enough. Have the students sit where they need to. Again, that also just means the students who need to sit up front or sit close to the door, they have to sit there. It's in the IEP. It is legally, you are legally obligated to follow that IEP. So if that plan says they have to sit up front, you have to have them sit up front. Otherwise, believe, if the parents find out that IEP is not being followed, that could all open up to a lawsuit, and this is where it gets really tricky. Okay? And there's alternate reading materials. And like I said, with the smart, and interesting enough, no one really addressed the fact that the smart board didn't work. Okay? So, again, there's nothing wrong with that. So you just happen to make your lesson based off of not using technology, which is fine. And then for that one student who doesn't want to write, maybe you can have another teacher in the room be the scribe, meaning that student could tell that scribe, okay, this is what I want. This is my answer to this question, and you just write it down. As a scribe, they are not going to lead that student to the right answer. Whatever the student says, that is what they're writing, no matter how wrong it is or correct it is. Okay? So that kind of like sums up most of what special education teachers have to deal with. Now we're going into school counseling. Okay, next slide. Keep going. School counseling, yay. And now, next slide. This is what they've mostly focused on. So obviously there's elementary, middle, and high school counselors. And each one focusing on different aspects, slightly. Elementary school counselors, you're just focused on emotional and social needs, okay? At that point, you just gotta make sure that, one, they're able to express their emotions, recognize their emotions, and for lack of a better term, understand how to interact with other students around them. Middle school, you have to continue on what they've built on in elementary, and also focus a little bit on academics. And I say that because depending on where you are, academics plays a much bigger role. Because when you choose your next high school, you're not always going to go to the same high school in your same district. If you want to go to like a private boarding school, okay, as a school counselor, you have to make sure that, one, their grades are adequate enough to be even considered for that boarding school or specialized high school, and that that student and the parents have all the information, have all their files and documentation proving that this student is capable of attending the school. And finally, high school. At this point, they're pretty much focused on academics. Like, they're just making sure, one, the biggest thing, you have the right credits to graduate high school. And not only that, they have to be prepared for life after high school. And I say that because, like I said in the beginning when I said not everyone is going to go to college, the sad reality is, as a school counselor, you're going to be prepared to deal with students who college is not for them, academically at least. If that's the case, if everyone's meant for college academically, I'm just going to be blunt. You're going to have gas station workers with bachelor's degrees. No disrespect to gas station workers, but that's the reality. And at that point, you have to think about what's plan B for them. If college is not for them, college is not even they're registering it ahead, what are they going to do? That's where you have to help them prepare for that decision. And there are other options. Now, which is like vocational school, where they're learning like trade, for example, like be a plumber, carpenter, hairstylist, whatever. Now, keep in mind, just because that's an option, that shouldn't be like an automatic option. If the student's not doing well in school, that's not just because their academics is not for them. That could be a lot of things. They could just be being lazy. That's just the truth of it. Or, hey, something's going on at home that's distracting them. Or there's other outside factors that's going on that's really taking their focus away from school. That's, as a school counselor in high school, that's what you have to handle, and that's what you have to address. The next slide, you have documentation. The documentation really just means whenever you meet with a student, you have to have some sort of physical copy or electronic copy of what was said, who did you meet, where did you meet, when did you meet, what was discussed, what was the result of that discussion. And I have a point, and in one of the bullet points I said that this could be the difference between being fired or not. That's not an exaggeration. A student, there'll be times where you'll have a student says one thing, and let's say something happens at home. Okay, did a student come to you to tell you this? You say, yeah, that's what happened. Okay, where's your documentation that shows that you had this discussion? If you do not have that documentation, you have no proof. You have to have your documentation over everything. And finally, only a few can see them. When I say only a few can see them, I mean only you as a counselor, the parents, the school psychologist, okay? And maybe special education teacher if needed, okay? They're the only ones who are allowed to see these documentations. If you have a teacher that just says, can I see a file on student A? Legally, they're not allowed to do that. And you're in the legal right to say, no, you cannot. Now, next slide, we have Rogerian, client-based versus solution-based. And I focus on, those are the two types of counseling styles I've seen most school counselors focus on. Rogerian is more client-based, meaning the focus is on the client, aka the student. Okay, you're trying to figure out, okay, what happened in the past that got him into trouble? For example, let's say I have a student in front of me. I didn't do my homework. Okay, why didn't you do your homework? I just wanted to play video games. Okay, why did you want to play video games? And they could say, at that point, it could be a lot of things. It could be like, I just want to distract myself from the stress from school, or I'm trying to distract myself from the troubles at home. So initially the issue is they didn't do their homework, but by focusing on the client, focusing on the past, you find that there's a root problem to all this, which is sometimes could be family issues, distractions, whatever. Solution-based is more, okay, you didn't do your homework. Okay, what can we do to fix this? I don't care what happened. I don't care what happened. What got you here? I care about what you're gonna do to change this problem. Meaning they're gonna focus on the future. So you see, those are two very different things. And counselors choose those two. However, for me personally, I focus on solution-based, and here's why. You remember how I said, like, teachers, to be an effective teacher, the ratio should be like 15 to 1 teachers, adults, students, and teachers. For school counselors, the ratio should be 50 to 1. The reality is, you're going to have 100 to 1, 200 to 1, 300. I have heard of an elementary school had housed 500 students with only one school counselor, meaning that school counselor has to focus on that 500 students, making sure that their needs are met. As great as Rogerian sounds, it's just not going to happen. It just takes too much time. Solution-based, you're only with these students for 180 days, give or take. And you have to address 100 of them, or 180, 200. Okay? Now here's a little case study. I have a child comes to you crying and says, my grandma beat me last night. Now this is where, for this case study, you guys are going to be the school counselor and you have that child come up to you. What are you going to do? What's your first gut reaction? Sorry? How do I feel? How do you feel? Okay. The kids cry. I'm playing the role as a kid. I'm not gonna pretend to cry because I'm not that good of an actor. I feel upset. Okay. Anybody else? You got this is as a counselor. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to figure out what's going on. You can't just ignore the student. What's that? Why did she beat me? I because she wanted to. I'm gonna pick. Oh, Ellie. Sorry, I didn't see you. Why did she want to? Because she wanted to. Remember, the kid cried. The kid's not gonna always know. Okay. Yes, Noah. May I talk to your grandmother? Ooh, I'm gonna touch upon that a little bit after. Why that could be that could be a problem. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'll touch upon that after. Let's see. Ben teacher, what would you ask that student? Next. What was that? Let's call 911, or in this, not 911, but in this case, child protective services. Okay. Yes. Oh, that's a good question. What happened between me and the grandmother, or the grandmother? We were playing a game of cards. Yes? Is your grandma actually your grandmother? Yes. Okay. Yes, David? Does this happen often? That's actually an excellent question. Does it happen often? Every night. Yes, Benny? Sorry, what was that? You know what? I'm going to stop you right there because in this example I made up, this is what actually happened. When the kid said she beat me in a game, we were playing a game, what he really meant was she beat me in a game of cards. You may laugh at that, but guess what? This happened. Okay? And to touch upon what Ben teacher said and Noah said, when you call Child Protective Services as a school counselor, this is very serious. You have to have all your information. Meaning, you have to know that you gotta tell them what happened, where did it happen, and this is also very important. Are there any visual marks? Okay? Because there is a difference between disciplining and physical abuse. There is a difference. If you have all your information, that's when you can, and you still feel strongly that the student is in danger, Child Protective Services can be called. However, just because you call them doesn't mean they'll always step in. Okay? They face cases like this every single day. This happens a lot more often than you think. You just don't hear about it. And it's up to the Child Protective Services to determine whether or not it was a serious issue. If they determine it's not serious, that's it. You can't do anything about it. And this also happened to a friend of mine. The problem she made a mistake was she didn't gather enough information. And because all she said was the student said, my parents abused me. That's all she gave them. Child Protective Services didn't, without even any consideration, hang up the phone on her. That was it. Nothing could be done. For all we know, some abuse could have happened. Unfortunately, without the proper information, you can't do anything about it. And to touch upon what Noah said about, I can't remember what it was. Not that one. It was, and if I remember correctly, the point I'm trying to make is this. what counselors face with when it comes to this is the problem of confidentiality versus morality. Meaning, confidentiality meaning no matter what the student says to you, it stays between you and the student and in the room. No one is to hear about it, except in the case of where the student is in physical danger, or what the student is about to do is going to cause physical danger to others. The problem there is, as a counselor, you want to have that trust with that student. The moment you say anything to that student, tell somebody, hey, this is what's going to happen, you run the risk of losing that student's trust forever. Is that a problem? Yes, because let's say, again, a student could be physically being abused. Who are they going to turn to? Not you, the counselor who told everyone what just happened. Why would they tell you? You lost their trust. That is what the counselors have to deal with when that comes up. Does it happen often? Not as much as you would think, or I'm making it out to be actually. But that's where you have to make that judgment call. And what every school counselor will have to agree with this. Confidentiality or not, you have to let somebody know. Okay? Will you lose that trust? There's a possibility. But the alternative is the parent's going to beat that kid so badly, you may not see him again. I am not taking that chance. If I could do something to prevent that from happening, I'll do it. Every counselor will say that. If a counselor says no to that, I don't know. I haven't met a counselor that said that. So, it got a little too serious than I was hoping for, but again, with school counts, this is just the reality of it. And before I move on, I also want to mention this one thing as a school counselor. They are not to diagnose any students. You're not a psychologist. If you see signs of a student showing display of ADHD, other health impairment, visual learning disability, it doesn't matter. You cannot diagnose them that. The only ones who could do that are actual mental health counselors or school psychologists. You're not allowed to diagnose them. You cannot, legally speaking, you cannot tell a parent or a teacher saying, without an IEP, saying, this student has ADHD. Without an IEP or actual documentation, you cannot say that. I cannot stress that enough. Now, chapter 3, how to get into education. So, for requirements for teaching, next slide, if it's up there, there are actually two routes for this. There's an undergrad route and a graduate route, meaning undergrad, you could go to a four-year college that has an education program, like I went to Manhattan College, where they have adolescent and primary education. Take those 4 years, and then once you get your bachelor's, you have to take, there are 2 exams and a giant paper. Educating all students, content specialty test, CST, and the EdTPA. The EAS is really just seeing, okay, you're a teacher, how would you teach this class? Or you have a student who reads at a 3rd grade level, and you're teaching a 7th grade class. How would you address that class? And you also have to know your laws as the laws pertaining to education. You have to know all of them. You have to know your rights, and you take an exam on that. The CST is really just more for adolescent education, grade 7 to 12th. Content specialty test, meaning if you're going to be a history teacher, you're going to take a test that tests you on everything about history from grade 7 to 12th. And I mean world history, U.S. history, geography, government, everything. And you have to score. It's not just an overall score. If you fail if you don't score enough in that one section of that content specialty test, you fail the entire test. And keep in mind, these taking the exams, they're pretty pricey. They're like 119 per exam. So if you fail a test, you essentially wasted $100. And lastly, the EdTPA. This is combined with what's called student teaching, meaning as a student, you're a student, but you're going to another school where you learn it's kind of like internship. You'll be partnered with a teacher, a very experienced one, and you'll learn how to manage a classroom, how to make a lesson plan, ultimately be a teacher, learn what it's like to be a teacher. And with the EdTPA, you're really it's a giant document detailing what you're doing that entire time. Meaning, okay, you're going to show your lesson plans for that entire unit. And I mean every lesson plan for that unit. You're going to talk about the thinking behind that lesson plan, and then you're going to show 10-minute clips of you teaching that lesson, and then your self-reflection. With the EdTPA, there's no minimum, there's a maximum. Meaning, you can submit a 2-page EdTPA, but if you do that, you're not going to pass. The minimum is 50 pages. You cannot exceed 50. So that's really just so you give an idea where you are. Requirements for counseling is a lot less rigorous. Really, all you need is a graduate degree. You need 30 credits for initial and 60 credits for permanent. That's it. Okay? That's really all you need. And now, the next part, job searching. Okay. So there's many different ways you could look for a job in schools. There's job searching engines specifically for teaching. There's OLAS, which is really more for really schools outside of New York City, like Long Island, Westchester, Hudson Valley region, upstate, all that. And then there's New York State Ed New Teacher System, where that's for New York City only, where you'll find a list of you have to prove that you have the license, and you can pick which school you want to get into, have the right credentials and everything. Another aspect is emailing schools. As silly as that sounds, that actually works, because last summer I decided to email this one specialized high school. I was like, I know you don't need a school counselor yet, but if you ever need it, here's my resume, this is who I am. And rarely they write back, but this one principal has happened to write back saying, okay, we'll keep your resume in file, we'll let you know when a position opens up. I was like, oh, cool, they're being nice, whatever. 3 months later, they emailed me saying, hey, we have an opening for a school counselor. If you want to apply, let me know if you want to apply. That's not, but it's going to happen. It happens. Connections. Well, no, this is where your school student teaching comes into play. If you as a student teacher, if you demonstrate that you're a very effective teacher, built up a very good rapport with the teacher and the principal, they could either hire you. They will hire you after you graduate. I've seen it happen before, or they can recommend you to another school. And finally, be prepared to go on a lot of interviews. The interview process is initial. You're meeting with the principal, telling who they are. If they like you, you'll be coming back. You'll be asked to demonstrate a demo lesson, and in front of a few students they choose to, depends on the school. And then finally, you'll be meeting with not just with the principal, the superintendent, the head teacher, other teachers, sometimes even the president of the PTA, and that's where, if you make it that far, you're in. And when I say go on a lot of interviews, I mean a lot. Not because there are openings for teaching, there's a lot of openings. However, and I found this out when I graduated college. By law, schools have to interview a certain amount of candidates. Okay? So even if they have someone in mind, they have to meet that quota. So for all you know, you could be going into an interview where they don't want to hire you. It's going to happen. So you have to be prepared to go on to a lot of interviews. And I'm gonna open up for questions about anything. Yes, David? Yes, David? Sorry. Do I get paid well? Oh, boy. Here's the sad reality of that. For teachers. Teachers, again, it depends. Like any other job, it depends on where you work in terms of how the pay scale. Yeah, yeah, I know there's a running joke that teachers don't get paid a lot. That's true. Because when I got out of college, which was like close to 10 years ago, the starting salary for one of the lower performing schools in New York City as a teacher was $40K before tax. Okay. Now, when you hear news about the huge teacher turnover rate where teachers are just quitting en masse, considering the fact they're dealing with a very rough population and very little pay, you can understand why they're leaving. However, there are other schools that will pay you more. But in those schools who pay more or just have a much better reputation, at that point you need a minimum at least 5 years of teaching before they even consider you. Okay? And yes, there are also other benefits too, like tenure, which means without just cause they can't fire you. Okay? But you have to it must have done really bad in order to get fired. You have a pension, where by the time you retire, you retire and you get paid for a certain amount. But you have to be careful with that because, for example, like technically you can't retire after 20 years of teaching. So let's say you started working right out of college. You're 20, teach for 20 years, you'll be 40. You can retire if you want to. However, and I've seen this happen before, schools have fought teachers saying, no, you shouldn't retire. What if you're too young? You shouldn't retire yet. What if you want to come back? And may deny that retirement. And of course, on the days off, summer vacation, winter vacations, not gonna lie, they're really nice for teachers. All right, so yeah, pay's not that great, but there are other things that kind of help make up for it. Oh, yes, Eric? When did I first realize I wanted to become a teacher? Well, this goes back a little background. When I was a student, high school, I was never that great of a student. I'll be honest. I was a lazy student. I could have gotten A's, but I was always a C or B student, so I had no direction. The reason why I became a teacher was because I had a science teacher who said, if you don't know what you want to be in life, be a teacher. As goofy as it sounds, I was like, okay, you know what? I don't know what I want to be. Let's give it a shot. And the only reason why I gave it a shot was because, again, my grades weren't that great. My SAT scores weren't that great. So I'm not saying students who do poorly should become teachers. I'm saying that's just where I was in my life. And and this is also want to know as well, in college, when you take an education class, you will be required to do observation hours. Meaning you have to go to a classroom where you observe a teacher. And one teacher was like, you know what? You've been here long enough. You teach a lesson. Gave me no directions, just go for it. I was like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And when I started teaching it, that's when I realized this is actually a lot of fun. This is what I want to do. That's when I wanted to become a teacher. Yes, Ben, teacher.
Yes, Johnny, teacher, we have a question from the chat. It's, what do you like and dislike about working as a special ed teacher?
What I like and dislike about working as a special ed teacher. Excellent question. The best part, I would say, is that every day is a new day. Kids, and this is not just special ed, but for education in general, there's always something new going on every single day. It's never the same routine pattern, like come to class, do this, that's it. Something's always going on every single day. It's always keeps me on my toes, keeps me energized, and it makes me look forward to every single day. The worst part, even though some people would say kids, I'm not gonna say it's the kids. It's actually the parents, believe it or not. And the reason why I say that is because I have had a lot of parents who are very oppositional to what I had to say and what I wanted to be able to accomplish. Okay, and this is where, one time I told one parent, the only reason why your student has this kind of grade is because he's not doing his homework or he's just not handing in his homework. The parent didn't like it and straight up told me, well, Mr. Chung, do your job and collect the homework. And I'm like, Dad, you're gonna have parents that are gonna speak like that to you. And this is where I quickly learned another skill you'll never learn in class, but you have to learn in the field. Kind of learn how to talk to parents. For example, I had to make an unfortunate phone call to the parents saying their kid's just failing. Instead of saying your child's failing, I just said, your child is very smart. He's very bright. He's capable of getting an A, but he's just giving an F effort. The grade he has is not what he does not demonstrate what he knows and doesn't know. It just demonstrates the amount of effort he's putting into it. That just sounds a lot better than saying your kid is just straight out failing. Okay? So yeah, do you have any other questions? Yes, Pastor Sean. Hold on. There's a microphone going to you.
My question is, if there is a condition or qualification to be the teacher, then what do you want to talking?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
If there is the condition or the qualification to be teacher,
Okay.
what do you want to say to the others?
What do I want to say to others about if I had a condition qualifications?
To be the teacher.
To the teachers? Well, first and foremost, I would say this. One, like I said in the beginning, or I think earlier, develop a thick skin fast. Learn how to be firm and learn not to back down from students. Because if you don't learn that skill, they'll walk all over you and you will not last a year. That's just a brutal, honest truth about it. Okay. Any more questions? Anybody? Oh, yes, Eric? All right, so those who didn't hear him, he said Ardsley or Brooklyn. I'm assuming you're asking me which do I prefer, Ardsley School or Brooklyn School? I am not going to answer that question, only because that could get me into a lot of trouble, believe it or not. Good try, though. Sure you do. Sure you do. Is there any other questions, Ben, teacher, in the chat, or? No? All right.
Okay. Let's give an applause to Jonny, teacher. This is why I introduced earlier. He is a teacher. He brought a lot of the material and the presentation, right? And he gave us a lot of the space and the place to think about it. So, do you have any prayer request before we begin?
I'd say, well, I'd ask, help me get through the last year of graduate school. I'm about to get my second master's, so hopefully I don't crash and burn. Yeah.
Okay, so let us in this time the hands to the John teacher and pray for him. Let's pray. 하나님의 시간을 청합니다. 우리 주 연생 가운데 하나님의 놀라운 일들을 행해 주시고 연생님께서 치유했던 모든 것들을 통해서 이 아이들이 자리 잡게 도와주시고 셀을 하게 도와주셔서 이 모든 것들과 놀라운 은혜를 경험할 수 있도록 도와주십시오. 이 아들을 통해서 이 아들의 오랜 헌신을 통해서 주 놀라운 일들을 바라볼 수 있게 되기를 완성되기를 요청합니다. 당신의 이름을 찬양하고 당신의 이름을 높여드리오니 이 아들의 모든 것 가운데 함께해 주시고 도와주십시오. Heavenly Father, whenever I heard the teaching and the speaking, I can feel his passion and the desire for you. He has uh, the warm the mind and warm the heart that brought you, and he has the passion to the children. So we pray for him. We pray that he is alive. Whenever whatever that he faced in the situation, please bless his every situation for the graduation, the school, and for the next steps. We really honor, and we really the thanks to you to give us the good teacher to us. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. 우리 박수 한번. Let's support to Jonny. Thank you, Jonny teacher. Good teaching.